Welcome to the monthly meeting of the Eames History Group. I know a couple of you are here for the first time and wonder what this thing was. Well, this thing is just a bunch of us that get together every month on the second Monday and here at this library, 11:30. And we just learn, share, and celebrate the history of this wonderful, unique area. Sometimes it's real local to the Eames School District. And sometimes we go a little bit broader into Austin and sometimes to Texas. But just a variety of things and really have a good time celebrating history. So welcome to this. And usually when people are here for the first time, we have them introduce themselves and tell us their connection to the West Bank. And it can be short, it can be a long connection. Tell us about yourselves just a little bit.
Okay, Claire Bench. We moved to Rollingwood and we bought the property, and then we did a tear down and built. Our son is an architect, so he designed our house. And so we were real happy to come to the West Bank Library, and Mahjong really kind of drew me to Laura's and here. And so I see a lot of Mahjongers here. And so we get the newsletter, and so Dave, my husband, saw that you were having this meeting today, so that's why we're here.
Okay, wonderful. And you want to introduce your husband? What you got here for the person?
Well, I'm Leslie Mashburn, and this is also my husband, whose name is Leslie also.
He's busy.
I've been coming, well, I'm a realtor, and I've been coming because I can't remember the first one I came to, but and my friend Gene Schuler did the LBJ thing. That was so fun. And then anyway, I've been enjoying it. Told him he would enjoy it too. So, oh, and we live out off Commons Ford and are interested in the history there in the park because there's a lot of old cabins and things that are.
Well, I've always just kind of been interested in kind of the history of the ranch. We live in the old Baldwin family ranch.
Oh my gosh.
Over off of
Field trip to their house.
Yeah, and I'm a geologist as well, and so I know Todd had mentioned he likes maps. I like maps, and I think my college professor at UT, who I was in geology, I think he used to take field trips into the Commons Ford Park. And I've been checking out some of the geology in there and have found some interesting things, but I'm not sure they even know.
Okay, I see a program coming up. Definitely see a program coming up. Let me see. We don't have anybody who's brand new. Colleen is back. I'm just so excited. Colleen is here. Thank you for coming. Okay, have I got everybody? Welcome again. And I want to give a big shout out to Gloria and Roxy, two of the librarians here at the library. Kristen is our normal partner in crime, is assisting her husband with a medical procedure today. And so she's not here, but Roxy and Gloria stepped in and took care of us in terms of setup and recording and water and that sort of thing. So we really appreciate the support that the library gives us. And thanks to Roxy and Gloria for today. I love this week of the year because if you remember, we've done it a couple of years now. This is the Celebrate Everything week. Last night was Super Bowl. The Lunar New Year is coming up. And then we end the week with Valentine's. And there are probably other things that I'm forgetting. But anyway.
Groundhog's Day.
That's right. That's right. And so what he said, 6 long weeks of winter and we get 83. And so today we're going to be celebrating the semi-quincentennial. That's the mouthful. And the reason I call it the 250th is because I cannot consistently pronounce the semi-quincentennial. Just a note of history on some of the things we're celebrating. One Super Bowl, I wanted to share that Melissa, where's Melissa? Right here. Melissa's son, Nick Foles, one of our favorite One of our favorite local athletic celebrities out of Westlake High School was featured on ESPN's 30/30 program Friday night, which was if you Google it, it's 2/6/26, February 6th, not 2026. And he was there because if you remember, he was the MVP of Super Bowl 52 back in 2018. And basically the game was won with an amazing play. It is legendary in football circles. And Nick was very integral to that. So they had the handful of players that touched the ball and were responsible for that play. And that's what this basically show, documentary, interviews, that sort of thing, what it was about. So we're going to try to figure out how to send you a link to that because it would be a really fun piece of history. I think we all could.
What I loved about it was the interaction of the fans. And it's so funny, several of the cook shops, they'd be showing the play, the really special with the food that they were making.
So anyway, great way to celebrate the Super Bowl. We are beginning to plan the whole year for 2026. So if any of you have ideas or suggestions of things you'd like to learn more about, you hear something in today's presentation that you want to hear more about, or if you have an idea for a field trip, please let me know what those are, and we'll see if we can't track them down and get them here. Especially if you are willing to be a speaker. Or if you have contacts, you don't just know a topic, but you know somebody who Rex just texted me this morning. He's invited 2 speakers because he actually had personal connections with programs that we've been talking about. We've had some great programs, and last month we had a terrific field trip down to the Harry Ransom Center. It was really amazing. The Saturday Night Live exhibit is still there. If you haven't seen it, I strongly encourage you to go see it before it moves to another city. And I do apologize again for the people that I've had to turn away. Normally we have 12 to 15 people sign up for a field trip. We had almost 40 people. And so Kristen and I are definitely rethinking deadlines and quotas and, number of tour guides and that sort of thing. So we won't have to turn people away again. What a wonderful problem to have. But that was wonderful. And I don't know if you have seen the news in the last week, but the Ransom Center just got Olivia de Havilland's papers. Several years ago, the same guy that curated the Saturday Night Live exhibit had curated a Gone with the Wind exhibit. So now they have Olivia de Havilland's papers, and I'm real curious as to how that might evolve.
And then about that one too, about Roy, his contribution
Yes.
to that field trip.
It was so fun. I actually carpooled with Roy down to the Ransom Center for 4 decades, since the 70s. For 4 decades, he was responsible for all of the film products and photography products. When they got so big, they finally split the job in 2, and photography was his specialty area. But the backstory that some of us were able to hear from Roy was priceless. So if you have questions about the Ransom that you didn't get answered in that field trip, we've got somebody right there.
I could say one thing. Steve Wilson is the former curator, he just retired. He did the Gone with the Wind. Did the Saturday Night Live exhibit. When he was researching Gone with the Wind, he was over in Paris a lot interviewing with to have them to where she lived to be over there.
Wow. In Paris. I guess somebody had to do it.
We all bragged about it, yeah.
And I wanted to just throw out this tidbit. If you remember when we were in our behind the scenes portion, and she showed us pictures of LBJ's Texas White House, and there were a couple of you who said, "Kelly, figure out how to get us in there." I found a group downtown and I'm going tomorrow. So I will see what it is and if it's interesting and how we can get in. So I might be able to make good on that request. I wasn't sure how that was gonna happen. But today, we are going to have a field trip of sorts. But it is going to be from the comfort of your children. It's a ton of information. I'll warn you, 103 slides. Oh, yeah, we're all gonna be panting by the end of it. But there's just so many cool things to talk about here. I'm not gonna talk about anything in depth. In fact, if I do start going into detail, somebody go. Because that'll wear us all out. I'm just gonna hit the highlights of the top 25. And then if you want more information, I'm happy to talk with you afterwards, or I can, we can get a program on that topic, or we've had programs on a lot of these topics, and we can pull up the whole thing on the YouTube channel of the West Bank Club Group. So there's a lot more information, but I'm going to try to stay at a non-confusing high level. And as we go, I have this map to give you a general idea of where the site is that I'm talking about. So if you get confused and you need to know, to understand what I'm saying, if you need to know where it is, I'll try to point out which of these black circles is representing it. Is that a deal?
Can I say a couple of real quick things that have happened historically, just in the last couple of weeks, like you talked about? One, Bray Lynch, Westlake football player, was a starter offensive lineman for the Indiana University. So he won Westlake's first ever national championship in college football, which as many great players as we've had, we've never had a champion. Jaden Greathouse was on the team from Notre Dame that came in second last year. And then Rick Ingram and Brad Shearer were on the 70, and Alec Beck were on 79 Texas team that came in second. But so Bray's our first ever national champion. Very proud of him. And then right after that, Drew Brees became our first
Inductee.
Pro Football Hall of Fame inductee on the first round. It was a huge honor. And a bunch of us are going to try to go at the end of the summer to Canton to watch his induction. And then finally, boys and girls Westlake, we've had about 115 teams roughly. And our girls just set the all-time record. They're 34-0. And had two teams that were 31-0 in the 80s, but this is the first time they've now got the record. They're number one in the state. They're the only undefeated 6A team, and they are beyond fabulous. If you have a chance. And then on the Philly special, so my son won a state championship in 2019, the first year that we won since Drew. And Todd Dodge's son, Riley, coached in the Metroplex and had already played Denton Guyer, the team that we were going to play. So, of course, we had a lot of great inside coaching, and he had given Todd a specific play that they had run on the goal line that completely fooled him. And so the way that they would do it is games at 7:00 so that we would drive up the day of and they would stop at Buc-ee's in Temple, and they would send the trainers ahead and set up the tables and tents to tape all the kids. So they, get out in the big parking lot, tape all the kids up and stuff. And they got the kids in the Buc-ee's parking lot and practiced this play. It's the only time they ever practiced it. And then that ultimately was the winning play. So that is known as the Buc-ee's special. That's the Buc-ee's special. So.
All of the things you never thought you'd find out this morning. So, but our field trip in the comfort of your chair is going to be through what I consider to be the 25 top historic sites in our area. But I want you to close your eyes to start with and think of what it might have been like in Philadelphia 250 years ago. Declarations being signed, there's a room full of men, it's July, it's hot, and they're signing this document that hopefully all of them have read. Okay, now switch your thinking to a cedar break that is so thick you can't walk through it. And if you could walk through it, the earth below you would be so rocky and so steep with ravines, you probably wouldn't want to go through the thick cedar bricks. Okay. A bit of a difference, right? I really tried to figure out what was going on 250 years ago here and have a program for you. And describing a cedar break was about as far as I got. So that's why we are going to celebrate 25 for 250 as our semi-quincentennial celebration. A couple of things. Speaking of deep ravines, I am sure there is stuff we have not found yet.
Yeah.
And so I want to put a disclaimer saying I don't pretend to know where everything is. Also, it doesn't include the 10 historic cemeteries in the EISD boundaries. I figured if I put those 10 in, then I'd have to kick out 10 more really interesting things. So I'll do a program later on the cemetery, on just the cemeteries. It also is in geographic, not chronological order. So it doesn't start with the earliest and then go to the next and that sort of thing. It goes more or less up Bee Cave Road. I thought that might be a little bit easier way to organize it in case you actually wanted to go out and visit. Do visit these sites. I have probably trespassed. And I would encourage you to do the same, but do respect private property. I actually got asked if a cemetery is available to the public, and as far as I know, a cemetery is. Now, I believe some families have posted their private family cemeteries, but I certainly can see a lot over the fence. And I do want to give credit where so much credit is due. If it had not been for Dorothy Depew and Linda Vance and a few other women back in the 70s and 80s who interviewed children and grandchildren of a lot of the people I'll be mentioning and collected artifacts from those families, we wouldn't know much of this at all. So I really, really appreciate what they did. And you all know this is our Bible, and it is digitized on the Portal to Texas History. So if you don't have a copy, just Google Portal to Texas History and then Eanes, and you'll take you right to a digitized one. And I also know that, or I certainly have learned, is that history is an evolving story. Everybody has their own perspective. So I have learned never to say, this is absolutely it. It's an evolving story. If you have parts to this story, please add them, because that's what's so fun about this group is everybody knows different perspectives on the same thing. Okay, so let's get going. We are going to start down here at the base of Big Cave Road. This is Mopac, just to get your bearings. This is Mopac, Zilker Park, and so coming out of Zilker Park into our area. We are going to start with the Delano Ranch, part of which became the city of Rollingwood. Now, I did a program on the Delano Ranch not too long ago. So some of you will remember this, but the highlights are Candido Delano, who was an Italian immigrant mason, bought a huge piece of land all the way from Colorado River to Barton Creek in 1905. He came to Texas to be a stonemason on the rebuilding of the Texas Capitol. It burned in 1881 and was rebuilt by 1888. So he tried his hand at retail, but he decided he wanted to do something with land, bought 1,500 acres out here in 1905. And he and his wife ran a little store for a few years before the ranching really got going. they owned on both sides of Bee Cave Road, and 3 generations ranched this land all the way from 1905 to the 1970s. This store is long gone. By the way, they lived in the back of it to start with. Then they had a house close by, and then another house, and there were 3 family houses in the whole. The last one does still exist, and I'll mention it in just a minute. But what is still there is a rock wall. So we can assume that the house was close to the rock wall at some point. I will mention, I went back this weekend just to refresh my memory on this site. And you can see in the background over there, there were some stone buildings. And Scott and I were going to go visit those stone buildings because he's pretty sure that, or we're pretty sure that that was the building that his father, who was an engineer with Mr. Burry or Mr. Putnam.
It was with Harvey Trade on Hudson, business partners, engineering firm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's where they had their office, which may have been a former Delano home. When I went back this weekend, those are gone. It really reminded me that I can't assume that things I see are going to remain. And if we have things that are worth saving, now is the time for us to think about how to do that. So anyway, this rock wall, well, where is this rock wall? It's in what was called the North Pasture. These beautiful new Rollingwood Center, the beautiful new office buildings, those first ones right there on Bee Cave Road. Between these two is Delano Road. And if you go around behind the building, behind the parking lot, there is a road that deteriorates as you go along. It gets pretty, pretty basic as you go along and pretty narrow. But it actually comes dead ends at the end of Rollingwood Drive, where Rollingwood Drive crosses over Dry Creek. So a pretty cool thing to sneak around there. I mean, you aren't really sneaking, it's a road. So when Endeavor owns this building, I'm not sure about that.
Which is all Westlake guys.
All Westlake guys. And they know that we have a history center, and they found a horseshoe as they were building this and brought it to me at the history center and asked if it possibly could be something historic. And I bet you it was on one of the Delano horses at one time. This plaque is on a huge rock that is to the left if you go into the Brookdale Senior Living Center. That is across Bee Cave Road. Let me see. This is where the original house was. The remaining house is more up on the hill that's across the road. So you have to cross over Bee Cave Road, go up Montebello to Liberty Park and in as if you were going to Brookdale. And on the left, there's this plaque that talks about the remaining ranch house, which is actually being renovated by a Westlake couple now. But it talks about, this talks about all 3 generations of the family. At one point, one of the sons who was not a rancher inherited some of the property, and he sold off the North Pasture. So that's how the development of the area north of Bee Cave Road began sooner than the rest of the property. And when that son inherited the North Pasture, he sold 300 acres of it to George Hatley way back in 1946. And George and his brother A.B. were the original developers of what became Rollingwood. They kind of split it up, and A.B. developed Stratford Lane, and George developed more of the Rollingwood proper. George is generally seen as the developer. Would you say, would our Rollingwood folks say that that's generally who's given credit? Rollingwood was incorporated as a village in 1955, and Frank Schofield. Did any of you know Frank? Frank was the first mayor, but there were only 28 homes when it was a village. As it began to grow, eventually it went to city status and was incorporated as the city of Rolandwood in 1963. What I think is remarkable in Shantae, this is all you. The Rolandwood Women's Club was established in 1958, and they have been a consistent, positive, energetic presence in Rolandwood since 1958. And Shantae has been their historian for the past 25 years, so she has all the receipts.
I'm retired. But I have to still.
So I think that's a program we could do, is concentrate on a lot deeper history of Rolandwood. Okay, let's move on up a little bit. You know where the car wash is on Bee Cave Road as you're coming from Zilker up towards Rolandwood. Across the street from the car wash, you'll see a little sign at Montebello that says Heritage Square. Turn in there and then immediately back to the right, and you will find a delightful office complex. Now, let me be clear. These are not original to this area or to this Eanes area. These are original to downtown Austin or other urban areas in Central Texas. But back in the 80s, when Rex was just a young pup, and this was one of your first
My
jobs.
first job out of Baylor was working for George. He had bought 300 acres there in Tremont. And they collected these houses by architectural type. So each house represents a different architectural type. And he and his wife, it was such a labor of love. I mean, they would go to Europe and they would buy all of these furnishings and they buy all of these gas lamps and convert them to electricity. And it wasn't the greatest business model that I've ever seen, but it was fantastic in terms of recreating these homes in just beautiful condition. And we really need to have a field trip and go through those because it is really fascinating, the different styles. And then across the street where the bank is was George's dream. He had this gigantic octagon, this 8-sided structure that he had bought that he wanted to do a restaurant. And it just never, it was, even for George, it was too whimsical. And so he sold to a bank, made a lot of money.
But you're absolutely right. We need to do a field trip here because each of these homes was researched, and there is a plaque out front. So if you go visit, you can tell what the style is, who the family was, when the house was built, where it was located, that sort of thing. This is just really delightful, and especially when they decorate for the holidays, great place for family pictures. By the way, Robert Eanes, the founder of our school district, probably came to this area because he had a brother, Alexander, who had lived here for a couple of decades. But Alexander didn't live out here. He traded and sold land out here, but he lived in town. Sabine and 19th Street. That's about where the Moody Center is now, MLK and I-35. And so he probably lived in a house that looked like this. In a few minutes, I'm going to show you the house that Robert may have lived in. Yeah. And you can see the difference between the city folks and the country folks for a long, long time. I'm sure you've all heard of Clarksville. You've heard of Wheatsville. You may know that the Austin area had a number of what were called freedmen's settlements. Did you know that we had one in this area?
Yep.
It was called Bell Hill. And it was located at the northern end of what is now Los Lomas Street. It seems to me that the access was probably from the river because there was not a road or any way visible in maps many years later to get to that area. So I think initially it was probably accessed from the river because it's just behind Stratford, what would be Stratford Lane. And there is a hill. that the Jackson family and the Woods family, that was mother and daughter, bought 56 acres back in the 1880s. And by 1900, it was a thriving little community. It had a variety of things, including a cemetery, a bar, a blacksmith shop. I mean, all the things that you would need. A note about the cemetery. I said I wasn't going to talk cemeteries, but that's what identifies this. Sorry. The first time I found the cemetery, and it's easy to find because between the last two homes on the left at the end of Las Lomas, there is a very well-maintained sidewalk. When Las Lomas was developed, this was 1984, the developers realized there was something historic there. And they paid a lot to have engineering firms come in and figure out how many graves there were, what the boundaries of the cemetery might have been, that sort of thing. And so all this comes from a notebook that the HOA gives to new residents when they move into Las Lomas. It's really pretty cool that they've kept that memory alive. So I went and found the sidewalk and went to the cemetery, and I found this. And I thought, oh, a headstone. This is construction debris. As much as I wanted there to be a stone headstone, there probably never was a stone headstone in this cemetery, all wooden markers, and none are left today. But again, we could have a whole program on this. There are a lot more people buried in the cemetery, particularly the Woods Cemetery, which is behind the Jackson Cemetery. A lot more people than you find in a normal family cemetery if it was just the Woods and Jackson family. So I do believe that there is a story, and I say a story because as I was doing more research for this presentation, I found a document from the Travis County Historical Association who says that the information about Bell Hill, and especially about the field hospital, largely comes from interviews with descendants, and they have not found archaeological evidence. So I'll leave that, but certainly the family and the story is that there was a field hospital at Bell Hill during the 1916 smallpox epidemic that Black and Mexican citizens in town could not go to the city hospitals. And so they were sent to Bell Hill. Many of them died there and were buried in the cemetery. And it does make sense from a size of cemetery for that era and the number of people that were in the area. But I just want you to know that there is a question there. And I did find out a lot about the pest houses. That's what the city called these field hospitals. Pest house. Because that's when people were sick, they would send them. And apparently, whether you were rich or poor, Black, white, whatever, the city said they sent everybody to the same ones, depending on geography, because they didn't want the epidemic to spread. So the interesting thing was that by 1932, when Fred Boulin bought a big chunk of this land, there was one guy left. So we don't know what happened or why folks disappeared.
Alan, question.
Uh-huh.
How is this, the places where people are buried, how are they denoted now, or are they?
They are not. The cemetery itself has a beautiful wrought iron fence around it. And to get to the Wood Cemetery, which is behind you, walk through the Jackson Cemetery so you can get a feel of the size. But I believe the engineering records do have places where the earth had been disturbed and they think that there were burial places, but those are not marked in any way on site. Okay. All right, we're going to move further up Bee Cave Road to the Dennis Walsh homestead.
Oh, yeah.
I keep this old picture in there. This is straight music today. But I loved it when it was Steinmart. And who remembers the very first retail establishment? Was it Safeway or was it Apple Tree?
Oh, Apple Tree, that's right.
Apple Tree, and then I think it became Safeway pretty soon after that. But the Westwood Shopping Center was formed from the farmland of the Dennis Walsh farm. Gives you a little hint as to where the name Walsh Tarleton Road might have come from. That behind that Steinmart building, if you go to the but if you go on Old Walsh Tarleton, which is kind of behind the shopping center to the east, behind the shopping center, the first drive is this, and it's heavily secured. If you look at an aerial view, thanks, Bill, for the last time we saw this slide, you looked that up and you said there is a concrete slab still behind there. So there is a concrete slab back here, which is where the house was. It was built in about 1910 by this guy named Dennis Walsh. He was an architect. And apparently he was the first professional man who figured out how to work from home. Because he was from Austin, but he figured out a way to live out here and actually make it work with the long trek back into Austin when he needed to go.
Can I say probably the most historic thing about the Westwood Center, maybe in all of Westlake history, is senior year, spring break of my senior year, me and all my buddies, we called ourselves the Cremolas. We stole the Taco Bell the night before it was supposed to open, got up on the roof, stole the bell out of the rooftop, kept it until the end of school, and then we hung it in the middle of the commons area during activity period. And the school knew exactly that we had done it, and they could never prove that we did it, so we got away with the whole thing. I just make sure that goes in the record.
I would say that's one of the best senior pranks I've ever heard.
It was like Jason Bourne. It was fantastic.
The statute of
Your
limitations.
mom question why something's hanging in her garage.
Bell.
Right. Gloria knew nothing. On this screen, this is really hard to see. Sorry about this. But I was sent this, thank you, Rex, was sent this aerial view last week of Hill Country. This is Hill Country Middle School. The picture is dated 1977, but this seems to me to be 1975 when it was actually being built. Seems like a lot of construction stuff is still there. But I wanted to point out a couple of things. This would be the road in front of,
Walsh Tarleton.
well, Walsh Tarleton now.
Old Walsh Tarleton's right there.
But this was old Walsh Tarleton. This is where Walsh Tarleton was.
That's Dr. Gates' house up on, in between. Right
And so-
below, right there, that clearing was Dr. Gates. He was an Austin doctor and had two girls who went to Westlake.
And from the
And they owned all that hilltop there.
from the 70s.
Yeah.
And this would have been the Dennis Walsh property. And that's where that's Bee Cave Road crossing over there. And so when they built the middle school, they actually took Walsh Tarleton and moved it to the other side of the shopping center.
Right.
So it would go straight to the new school. So that's how it's squared up. It used to take that big, where Dog Leg at Wilderness Drive and that sort of thing. But they straightened it out when the new school was built.
Ellen, kind of interesting little side note about the Westwood Shopping Center.
Mhm.
That was a very controversial thing building that because Westlake did not have any kind of shopping center like that. And there was a lot of contention about it. And so
Imagine that, contingent about it.
and everybody woke up one morning and they moved bulldozers in overnight, scraped the whole property overnight. And people were just, furious. And so they actually struggled for a while because a lot of people were like, we're not shopping there, for a time period. So yeah, because they were literally cleared it overnight. They came up next morning, it was just mowed down the whole thing.
We remember that.
Yeah.
Well, I've also often wondered why that shopping center which is relatively small, is on both sides of Walsh Charlton. You know, that didn't really make any sense until I saw this, and that's the shape of the parcel.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah.
So it makes sense that they used the property they were, able to get. Patricia?
Well, I have a question about the Soap Creek Saloon.
That's the next slide. And that's one reason I wanted to show you this, because figuring out exactly where the Soap Creek Saloon is, has always been problematic. The best description is Rex's story about him being on the 7th grade football team. He was in first class of 7th graders at Hill Country, and on the 7th grade football team, and their entertainment to distract themselves during football practice was to watch the beer trucks chug their way up to the Soap Creek Saloon, because you see this kind of odd shaped white line? That is the driveway up to Soap Creek. Now, what you can't tell from this is there's this huge embankment there. So it's up on a hill,
Yeah.
overlooking what became the athletic fields.
Driveway's still there.
Is it the one that goes?
It's up at the office park.
It still gets an option.
Okay. Yep.
And also next to Soap Creek Saloon was a Little Rock house that Doug Somm lived in. And Doug was really Willie got all the publicity kind of internationally, but Doug was really the Austin Cosmic Cowboy guy. He was the center of that whole progressive country music in Austin. It was so important. That's why City of Austin gave him the hill down on Pike Bike Trail. So Doug's one of our real famous residents to live there.
But before we go up that hill to look more closely at Soap Creek, I want to talk a little bit more about Walsh Charlton. I mentioned Walsh is the name from one end. Charlton was the name of a family more or less at the other end, down by Barton Creek, or the Greenbelt, 360, that area. They were a cedar chopper family because originally there were the thickness of the cedar breaks. I mean, look at that.
Yeah.
The thickness of the cedar breaks in this area, because there's a number of creeks that we're right on the fault here. And so a number of creeks are coming together, and very, very thick ravines. And so there were cedar choppers who lived in the woods, in tents, in carts, in sheds, whatever they could make do. They were very itinerant, moving where the cedar was. And it was so thick. This was prime cedar chopper area. In 1870 to 1890, in this area, they even had what were called cedar wars, because everybody was looking. They didn't own the land, but everybody was looking for land they could cut. And there was railroad fever. Remember I said that the capital of Texas burned in 1881. It was rebuilt over the next decade, and they had to bring in materials. Who knows where the red granite came from? They had to build a railroad. Where did the limestone come from? Oak Hill, Convict Hill. And so they had to build a railroad. So there was a big demand for railroad ties. Cedar made the best railroad ties. So that just fed these cedar wars. And it's estimated that in 1875, 30,000 logs, cedar logs, 30,000. There weren't near that many people in the city, were floated down Barton Creek or the Colorado River through Austin for other markets, in addition to the markets I mentioned here. So this area was filled with cedar chopper families. And originally, that end of the road was known as Tucker Lane, because the Tuckers were another big clan of cedar choppers. I will say, we have to own up to this, that in the 30s and 40s, very derisively, city people called this road Tobacco Road. Erskine Caldwell's novel had come out, and they called this Tobacco Road because that's what they thought of the folks that lived on this. But eventually it came to be known as Walsh Tarleton, basically. When we first moved here, I thought Walsh Tarleton must have been a person. But no, it's the two different families representing the two different ends. And I will say, Michael Barnes wrote an article on this several years ago. Walsh Tarleton used to be hyphenated as recently as 30 years ago. I mean, I remember that when I first was introduced to the road 30 years ago, it was hyphenated and Tarleton was spelled the traditional way with an E, Tarleton. TxDOT now unhyphenates it and spells it the more modern way, Tarleton. So sometimes they make decisions for us. Okay, Soap Creek Saloon.
Oh, yeah.
I think this is the driveway you're talking about. It goes off Bee Cave Road, just to the west of Walsh Tarleton.
It lines up with Bullion.
Mhm. Yep. And there are a lot of associations with Bullion Lane as well. This, we'll talk about in just a minute how famous it was, but boy, was it hard to get to.
Yep.
Bee Cave Road was still a mess at the time. And so most people wouldn't even try to get out Bee Cave Road. But from the Austin Chronicle, the rundown shack of a venue was on what was then a godforsaken stretch of Bee Cave Road, and the rutted dirt trail that led to it was even more notorious. So you had to really want to get there, and once you got there, you decided you might as well party.
Ellen, my husband was on the Rollingwood Fire Department then. He said he hated those calls at night when somebody had too much to drink and had to go scrape them off the roads.
Oh, Bee Cave Road or this
From
road?
Soap Creek, somebody had.
Yeah, didn't make it down the right way. So talking about how this fit in the developing Austin music scene. If the Armadillo World headquarters was the heart of Austin's music community in the early 70s, Soap Creek Saloon was its soul. And Rex has made connections with, this is the 50th, almost the 50th year.
Yeah. Over 50 now. I went a couple years ago.
That's right, he went to the 50th anniversary celebration and we're gonna have those people here one of these days. It did promote local musicians, but also there were some big headliners. I don't know if they were headliners then, but I recognize them, Willie Nelson and Charlie Pride. This was in 1975, and this operated until 1979. So this was in its height from the early 70s to 1979. This is when Soap Creek Saloon was a really big deal. But after it closed, the rundown barn or rundown shack actually was used for a couple of other things. For a while, it was used as a speakeasy. Not a speakeasy because we weren't in Prohibition, but as a private club where people could come and drink. Then Fred Boulin used it as his milking barn. We're going to talk about his dairy in just a second. And Griffith's. Anybody know about Griffith's Party Barn?
Griffith's
Western Wear, but apparently they had a party barn too.
What time? When was that?
It was after Boulin sold in 56, so probably late 50s, early 60s.
Ellen, the best tribute I've ever heard to the Soap Creek Saloon was by Eddie Wilson, who was the founder of Armadillo World Headquarters. And he talked about how important Armadillo World Headquarters was kind of nationally and stuff. But he said locally, he said Soap Creek Saloon was the sinking of the nail, which I think is a great tribute. Yeah. From the guy who really is credited with the whole scene.
Wow. Pretty cool.
What caused it to shut down?
It was too close to the middle school. They said it was too close to a school, and so that's why they shut it down.
Civilization encroached.
Armadillo and that were just these crazed hippies, the no business sense whatsoever. I mean, it's a miracle that those places stayed open as long as they did, because they were just, it was the 70s. I mean, and these were not business people at all. running these places and just kind of ran out of. stuff.
Yeah,
Same invented, or is there a soap creek?
I am not aware of a soap creek. But that's a good question. I'll research that. There is a Lost Creek, by the way. I get asked that all the time. But I am not aware of there being a soap creek, but let me look.
And the old hippie couple that ran Soap Creek, always called the middle school Soap Creek Middle School. There you go.
Because on Friday afternoon, walked down to the Soap Creek Salon, and I was too old, I knew nobody.
You were probably 30 at the time and too old. Okay, well, you heard us mention Woodland Dairy and the milking barn. Well, it was right across Bee Cave Road, and this picture is not a very good picture, but it's the only one we have. This is the end of the word Boulin and then place on this side. Fred Boulin obviously loved concrete.
Yeah.
Because we'll see in just a minute, he's also the one who poured the Eanes School letters in front of Eanes Elementary, a little bit up the street. But anyway, this was his dairy operation, which he moved from South Austin. This is his wife and baby daughter, but I wanted to show you this because this car is described as a bootleg car, and the definition of a bootleg car was very, very interesting. It was one that was sold by a traveling salesman rather than through a dealer. So those conversations about whether or not you have to have dealerships and that sort of thing has clearly been going on for a very long time. Okay, this next slide takes us kind of behind Boulin's land, Rocky River Road.
Yeah.
On Rocky River Road, there is this wonderfully restored rock cabin. It was the home of Linton and Edna Pierce for about 60 years. They married as soon as he came home from World War I, which is interesting because the references say he was 17 when he got married. So it's like, I'm not sure how old he was when he went off to war. But she was 14 and a half and he was 17. She was actually from a cedar chopper family that ended up owning a lot of property. The Patterson Road out in the western part of the district. She was a Patterson. Her mother was a Riley, which was also another big landowning family in that area. But they married, had 9 children that they raised in this house. And even though this area got electricity in 1933, in this house, she cooked on a wooden cook stove because she chose to until the mid-'80s. We have her cook stove at the History Center, and the students, the 4th graders, just have a hard time wondering why anybody would do that.
So I'm not making a connection here, but the Delana house, the Old Stone House, was that same type of rock that you
Yep.
see there.
Yes, and this looks very much like the Old Rock Schoolhouse, which was built in 1937 by Edward Johnson, a local rancher who was also a stonemason, local materials. So all of them have a very, very similar look.
Well, that's called fieldstone because the dark ones are where it's oxidized, where it's been exposed to the elements. That's what gives it kind of that patina. It's just wonderful.
Yeah. What is really cool is that the folks who bought this property years ago built a house, and they built their main house out of the same materials and in the same style to complement this house that they use as a guest house. So they've just done a beautiful job of, I don't know if I'd call it restoring, but I guess restoring it. Yeah, Jeffrey.
That's a cedar chopper house.
Yes.
And I grew up with most kids that lived
Mm-hmm. Yep.
there.
Yep.
And are you gonna show outhouse too?
The outhouse has gone to its
There's probably on a
Rest.
bonfire at Westlake in the 70s. Well, they used to, when we build bonfires in the 70s, they would go find an old outhouse to put on top of the bonfire. Bonfire used to be in the stadium just west of the stadium. It was all third up in that time, and they would build a big huge bonfire. They would go find an outhouse somewhere, an old one that was abandoned, and put it on top of
That is great.
bonfire. Maybe that's what happened to
But
it.
what I'm saying is that family of Edna Pierce,
Uh-huh.
were children, you know, they were cooking on a wood stove, as you mentioned, but their bathroom was out back in an outhouse.
Yeah.
And that was way up until, you know, water lines and electricity had been.
Right. Yeah. Amazing stories.
Just one comment, I think that they call that style of stone masonry giraffe style.
Giraffe style,
Because it
okay.
looks like the pattern on a giraffe.
Giraffe, okay, great, that, okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense, thank you, thank you. Okay, we're gonna move on to the corner of Westlake Drive and Bee Cave. That's a traffic light, nothing historic about that. But I wanted to mention that this area in through, where's Westlake Drive? This Westlake Drive. And Bee Cave Road. So we're talking about the stuff that's right here at this is Bee Cave Road. So we're talking about things right there at that corner. There was only a cow path that went down to the river. It was called Yacht Club Road, which somebody got pretty high and mighty for it to be called, and this dirt path was called Yacht Club Road. But there really wasn't a Westlake Drive at the time, because this whole area was the Gano Ranch. And no, the Gano family never lived here. And so it was pretty undeveloped. And actually, a lot of cedar choppers found a lot of work because there was nobody there policing the area. But it had a variety of uses on both corners, both the west corner and on the east corner. Let's look at those. This is on the west corner. This is where Shiflett Architects is now. But it was originally Baird's store. Pop Baird bought acreage, small acreage, in an auction in 1932. This was the same auction that Fred Boulin bought a bunch of acreage just down the way, same auction day. And there are stories that I haven't quite deciphered about price fixing, or everybody talking about what price they were going to offer so they would not step on each other. It would be a polite way of saying what the conversation seemed to have suggested. But anyway, a number of citizens who really were contributing citizens to the community came in at that time in 1932. And so Pop Baird first built a log cabin. Well, 1932, you're in the middle of the Depression. 1933 was when the CCC boys came to Austin and stayed down in Zilker Park. So he put his log cabin on rollers and somehow got it down to Zilker Park. It's kind of downhill, downhill all the way to Zilker. And so he sold things to the CCC boys there for a while. Then in 1937, when that kind of petered out, came back and built this frame retail establishment. And it basically is the first continuing retail establishment that we have documented here in this area. Children would come by after school and he'd give them a piece of candy. He was a school trustee, so he was probably trying to curry favor. And they loved him. He was really an icon of the community. And in fact, it was he and his sons. He had a side job, was working with the telephone company in Austin. So he and his sons were the ones who actually volunteered to string the lines for electricity and telephones here in 1933. Really a huge contributor. I find this picture fascinating. This is the same structure, but with a new highfalutin stucco front.
Yeah, nice.
Story has it that this crane actually was commandeered after it was used to build the Tom Miller Dam in 1940. Don't know if that's true or not, but it makes a good story. Several years later, his son took over the business and moved it down Bee Cave to the other side of Bee Cave, sold it to Utotem, and now it's the 7-Eleven. But it's still continually operating. And I'm so excited. I got an email last week from Pop Baird's probably great-great-granddaughter, who is going to have a kindergartner next year.
Oh, wow.
And she had questions about the different elementary schools and that sort of thing. So it's like, oh, it'd be so cool to have a Beard descendant back in our schools. Okay, well, Beard Store isn't there anymore, hadn't been there for a while. And this beautiful building is. It was built as the Franklin Savings and Loan. And then they went out with the major issues of savings and loans in the mid-80s. They went out with a flourish. It was built in the style of the German courthouses in Fredericksburg, which I always find fascinating. So if you go to Fredericksburg, take a picture and then come back and see how it compares. The upstairs conference room was called the Baird Conference Room, and they saved as many pictures as they could find and get from descendants about the Baird family. And that's actually why we have a lot of information on this particular family, is because it was framed and mounted in that conference room. And the windows on the second floor are new. That used to be enclosed.
Yeah.
And now it's Mark Richardson Architects. This is a neighbor of ours. So the
Okay.
is a unit.
Okay. I have to re-research these every week. Okay, this is the other side of Westlake Drive, the eastern corner. And it's hard to get a good picture now.
Yeah.
Somebody told me last week when I mentioned to them that this once was Westlake Hills, or built as Westlake Hills Presbyterian Church. They're like, really? That was a church? But I tried to get a picture of the big utility pole for you, but of the original design, there was a cross there, and this was the sanctuary, so you can kind of see how that would be a church. Westlake Hills Presbyterian Church moved here when they gave up the original Eanes Chapel building on the Eanes Elementary campus. And we'll see in just a second. St. John Newman's Church moved in here afterwards. And then banks, I know Treaty Bank was in there, Treaty Oak Bank, several others, and now it's been converted into office space.
It's still Treaty Oaks, it's just been bought
Multiple times.
Out South State.
And there are a lot of other
Same
businesses,
bank, it's just.
as banks are apt to do.
And Ellen, real quick, where the church is, I've always gotten such a kick out of. It's super low there. You know, it's always wet in front of the church. You know, there's springs and you can see from the elevation of the road. But that area, because that was really kind of the crossroads, and it was just a mud hole, and it was always known as Hell's Half Acre, which I think is a funny location for a church.
I hadn't thought about the church location, but I'm glad you mentioned the Hell's Half Acre, because it was kind of the stretch from about where the 7-Eleven, the Utotem, is all the way to West Bank Drive. That was Hell's Half Acre. And back then they were referring to the muddy, rocky conditions, we think. Now people still call it that, I bet, and they're referring to traffic.
Yeah.
Because that's still where it is so bad. Okay, by this time we're in the city of Westlake Hills, which has this new gorgeous city hall. But going back a little bit, this is a bust of Emmett Shelton that Jeffrey had done. It's beautiful. Thank you, Jeffrey. He was a lawyer out in this area, and you've probably all heard Jeffrey's stories about Emmett. But he began buying property very early on. When he finally convinced the city of Austin to build a low water crossing bridge over the Colorado River, just underneath the dam that was completed in the 40s, early 40s, they did the low water crossing in the late 40s. And the way he finally won the argument with the city of Austin was he told him he would stop running for city council if they would build the bridge. And they did, and he did. In fact, he led the move to create a separate city so the city of Austin would not annex them, and he wouldn't be eligible to be a city council member. It was incorporated in September 9th, 1953. They, at first, I mean, talk about a ragtag city organization. There were boxes in closets and garages, and there was a mayor who had one term, and then who had a 1-year term. So they were changing leadership every year. Then they went to 2 terms, and finally in 1974, a guy by the name of Tom Taylor was elected a mayor, and obviously he was a very talented guy. He stayed mayor for 21 years actually.
Was that Tom Taylor's house that was on, is it Eaton School Road that goes by the high school? They're building new, was that his house? There was a pretty old house that
I've never heard
right
him.
up on the hill.
Jim, do you know where the Taylors lived?
Yeah, we were at the house one time and that's all. Yeah.
I'll see if I can figure out. I think that was the Jones, Dr. Jones.
There was another man by the name of Taylor that lived there
Okay.
when he moved out here.
Okay, let me see if I can figure out if that's him.
The football game between Westlake and Austin High for a long time has been known as the Battle of the Low Water Bridge. And last year, I kind of started the process to formalize it as the Emmett Shelton Battle of the Low Water Bridge, because Emmett went to Austin High, lived in West Austin, was a fixture over there, but really got Westlake Hills in particular started. And so he really is and then the bridge is named for him in between. So he's really the bridge guy. And now the UIL, just last week, put us in a new district and we're not playing Austin High anymore. So it's our mothership, as we came out of Austin High. So the old timers like Scott and I are very sad that we're no longer going to be playing Austin High.
Absolutely.
At least for now, at least for 2 years.
Absolutely. But it is, by the way, the official name of that low water crossing is the Emmett Shelton Bridge.
Oh,
It was, they named it for him after they built it. Jeffrey.
So, Mayor Tom Taylor, explains over off of Wildcat Home.
Wildcat Home, so it was a different Taylor family. But I'll see what I can find out about those Taylors. This is the new Westlake Hills complex, and go into it. It's a beautiful building. It takes advantage of the views and the sunlight. Go at about 4:45 in the afternoon. Sunlight filtering in through this lobby, and the grounds are native plants. They are just beautiful. So that really, I think, will be a service to the community.
Now, I got to give my developer comment real quick. City of Westlake Hills is very difficult to build in or to modify even your own property and stuff, but somehow the city managed to give themselves 57 variances. No. I don't know how that happened.
And I'm not going to comment. But it did turn out beautifully. What can I say?
Church was selling.
the church was selling.
Yeah, they were Woodley membership. but
Yeah.
Somehow they figured out a way to get that done.
Yeah.
Somebody.
Yeah, amazing how that happens. And I'm going to try to speed up here because I've got a lot more to go. There is an area I'd like to point out, and again, this is my triangulation of a number of different sources of where I think a Native American campground likely was in this area. We know because there are so many artifacts, arrowheads, and that sort of thing, that they certainly came down the creek beds and along our creeks in this area during hunting and gathering season. And there are stories that have been passed down of a campground that was seasonal. This is in Sundown Parkway. You go into Sundown Parkway and the immediate left goes to, I'm not sure they have any horses there now, but the community, that
There's
community.
horses there now and it's gated.
Okay. Oh, so you can't get down it.
There's a combination.
So if you park your car and walk around the fence, you can get to, in fact, you can see a horse jumping apparatus there. But you come down here, and to Rex's point of a lot of springs that keep the area damp close by, still happening here. The hydrology of this area is just fascinating. The creek is running underneath the trees on the other side of this picture. And so this is where the creek bottom, if you will, flattens out, and it's nice and flat. And there are huge oak trees, which is part of the story that has been passed down. Oak trees and pecan trees, the Tonkawas were the ones who would have been in this area. I also think this is likely the place where Robert Eames built that very first log cabin. It's on the edge of his property, and it's supposedly that first log cabin was underneath a large oak tree, and they would have had fresh water from the creek because there's a spring, several springs there. So I think this is also where that first log cabin will be. So two different eras. If you don't want to trespass and you want to know what it looks like, this is what the creek looks like. And these black, I mean, it looked like kind of black things in there. Those are springs. Those are holes you're looking at. And there are several of them, depending on what the water level is. And also, I found it fascinating that in Smith Creek, which, by the way, TxDOT changed this too. They call it Eanes Creek. It's the one that runs behind Eanes Elementary, comes out where the car wash is down on BK. They call it Eanes Creek now.
No good.
But it was called Smith Creek or Dry Creek back in the day. And there are travertine pools with the edge that have been developed because of the mineral deposits in the water. Okay, I'm going to skip over the Eanes History Complex because we can do this in a whole program, and it's a bunch of stuff. But just know that there are the letters out in front of Eanes Elementary. There's the museum. There is the original chapel building. This is actually the oldest remaining building on the Eanes Elementary campus. It was built before the current schoolhouse. This was done in 1928 with all volunteer labor and all donated materials. And you'll notice that it is not the giraffe pattern. It was just let's put one block on top of the other. That's how you do it when you've got everybody in the community contributing versus a stonemason who can actually do a design. The Old Rock Schoolhouse, built in 1937, which still remains. The cemetery, and that's the community cemetery, not the Eanes Family Cemetery. There's also a shed with a wagon barn, a trail, and a time capsule. I don't know that any of us will be around in 2092 when the time capsule is. When the school kids come to the center and I have them do the math, and they're all going to be 80, 79, or 80. I realize you'll have to send me word about that. We also have the Eanes Marshall Ranch House. Now, this is not the original location of the ranch house. I'm going to show you that in just a second. But this is where the ranch house has been relocated to, so it is around the other historical aspects of the school district. And this is real typical. Remember those fancy houses that we saw at Heritage Square? Well, this is what a now well-maintained rural house looked like. That they had stairway going upstairs to a sleeping porch, so no internal stairway. And there would be, they used fieldstone, local materials for the rock exterior, the rock chimney. And frame construction the rest of the way. I've always been surprised that they did not have the kitchen in a separate building. I'm from the Southeast, and the kitchen was always separate. But here in rural Texas, this seems to be the style. The kitchen is interior. Across the Eanes School Road from the Eanes Elementary campus is this gorgeous dry stack stone fence built by Plato Martinez, who bought the land from Robert Eanes in 1880 and just did a fabulous job. It's 8 feet tall in some places, and it still remains and is still there. Great to just take a glance at it. And you ask about the stuff on Campcraft Road. I wish I could tell you what was going on Campcraft Road. I have not been able to figure out all of the machinations. The chunk of land from Eanes School Road to the high school was purchased in the 30s by Dr. Ben Jones. And he and his wife created a preschool that was called Country Day School. Okay, so y'all probably, where exactly was the Country Day School building?
Where the music school is now, kind of, sort of, right there.
That,
They used a separate, we used to walk back to the back building and do little stuff there.
Yeah, they had a lot of it went outdoorsy and everything, had a small building that you go in and watch cartoons or whatever, when it was rather just that.
yeah, there were several buildings. This property was for sale for a long time. And there were several buildings, including a gorgeous rock two-story home. I think they took that down to the studs, that rock home. I haven't gone around to the backside of this new construction, but I'll figure this out and let you know. That
They're no longer living. They're really over 100. But they remember coming out to a country club right there, and that there was a pool.
Yes, and in fact, on old maps, you see that there was a swimming pool on the St. Stephen's campus, and it's on the map, and there was a swimming pool in the Country Day School complex.
Yeah, but they also, for some reason or other, one friend said that was the road to the country club.
Okay, I'm not sure where the country
Well,
club.
that was down that road and right there.
My kids went to after-school care at what was, it's now Armstrong, and what was probably Country Day. And I think the owner was a family named Taylor, and I'm not sure if they own that house or not. But I worked for the Austin Public Library from 74 to, I don't remember when. But friends of mine lived in that house, the big house.
Mhm.
They rented it out, and there were 5 of them, and they called it 5-Girl Farm.
That is a great story. 5-girl farm.
My classmate Tana Hale just sent me a photograph of her dad at Camp Craft in 1943, a group picture with all the kids and stuff. So-
Okay, I'd love to see that because I've always been told that this building was actually acquired or built as Camp Craft. That Camp Craft was a extension of Country Day School. They wanted something for the summer, particularly for girls. And so they had a camp that focused heavily on crafts, and they named it Camp Craft. And the county gave Dr. and Mrs. Jones the opportunity to name the road that went to their operation, and they called it Camp Craft Road. I guess it was an early form of marketing. So that's how Camp Craft Road got its name, was from literally a Camp Craft. Now, we've talked before that Camp Craft, there are 3 pieces of Camp Craft Road currently in our school district. One is the part that comes right off Bee Cave Road. A second discontinuous part is across from the high school, about a half block offset, that goes between the People's Pharmacy parking lot and the dentist office. That is Camp Craft. And then if you go across 360 and to the Greenbelt, up the Hill of Life, or to the entrance of the Hill of Life in the Greenbelt, that is Camp Craft Road.
Right.
And it's like, okay, so how did this road, where did this road go? I found a couple of old maps that actually have Camp Craft becoming a rectangle. It goes across to about where West Bank Drive is, and then it became a rectangle. So that's how the piece at the Hill of Life and the connects to the piece that runs by the high school.
And Ellen, if you look at the old aerials of where the high school was first built, the piece that's coming from Eames would go straight and connect with the other piece by People's Pharmacy. But then they added parking lot, so they spread it around.
Right. And there's a real story in how the school district acquired the 7 acres to make that curve in Camp Craft. It has to do with a suicide and anyway.
That one actually was moved twice because it went straight across,
Mhm.
straight across. And when they built the high school, Camp Craft was moved to where basically right in front of where the theater, the auditorium is there. And then when they added that, and they moved it further to the north. So
And created the parking. Okay,
Yeah.
good to know. I've never heard that. That's wonderful. But speaking of the high school, I put it in here as a historic site because now it is officially a antique. After 50 years, something can be considered an antique, and the high school was established 57 years ago. It is notable because the creation of the high school completed the education system out here. There had been the Eanes Elementary School for years that went through 7th grade or 6th grade. And when the high school was formed and we had a K-12 system, and that bridge was completed so you could get to and from Austin with relative ease, those two things were the catalyst for growth. And growth exploded in this area in the 2 decades of 1975 to 1995. 7 out of 9 campuses in our school district were built during that era. I mean, it was just crazy. And I call your attention to these notable folks that I'm sure if you've been associated with education in the area, you recognize some of these names that they are memorialized. Just fabulous, fabulous educators. Who remembers what used to be where the Westlake Athletic Shriner? I mean, I still call this the Shriner track. Now it has a couple of school district buildings on it, but it was the Shriner track. Interesting note is when the school district acquired this, it was by eminent domain, but acquired it in about 2001. At the bottom of the hill, right next to Smith Creek, they had to do a lot of mitigation of the earth because it was filled with lead shotgun remnants. There was a rifle range down there as well as a barbecue pit. So all that had to be remediated. Well, we are at 1 o'clock and we are at number 15.
Put a
So-
bookmark on it.
What?
Put a bookmark on it.
So I would recommend that we stop here and that we pick this up, you know, when we have a vacant program spot, if that's okay with y'all. It is, okay. Sorry, I told you I'd probably give too much detail on each one. But we can go, I mean, we can have a whole program on every single one of these because they're all just have fascinating stories.
Cedar Crest in your program?
I have Cedar Crest Lodge, is that, yeah. And in fact, Jeffrey, I'll give you a spoiler alert on this. Jeffrey Dochin has just volunteered to do a program on the County Line restaurant, which is 50 years old this year. They are 50 years old as a barbecue joint.
Yeah.
With that gorgeous view, and that's like number 19 or something like that here. And so that's worth celebrating.
We're gonna have the meeting up there?
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's an idea. But if you've been to County Line, it sounds like most of you have, the walls are filled with pictures.
Yeah.
That means it's filled with stories. And who better to figure those out than Jeffrey Dochin?
And some of them are true.
And some of them are true. The pictures are probably not fake. I mean, given when they were taken.
Like several people, about 25 people in my class went to County Line on the Lake about 3 months ago. And one of my dear friends, Ella Martin, she was looking at pictures, oh, that's my grandfather. And
Wow.
so I need to call her and say, hey, you know, so she was going, yeah, her grandfather saw those pictures, and that's all we had time to talk. We went to eat, but it was kind of interesting that she said that she explained those pictures. So
That is awesome. I mean, what amazes me is what people know that they don't know they know. A couple of weeks ago, the family of a Westlake High School graduate who died from a meningitis type infection at Texas Tech her freshman year. It was really a very tragic story. Her family came to the History Center because years ago they had donated her homecoming moms. She loved homecoming moms and had like 8 of them. And so they had donated all of them to the History Center. And we have them framing the high school exhibit in the Yellow House Museum that we just breezed by. And so her family came to look at those. And her stepfather walks down the hallway and goes into the room where we have artifacts, including things from the Roy Ranch. And there is a picture of Rob Roy with a dead cougar that he has strung between two poles. And he's just standing there holding a gun with a couple of his buddies. And Ann's stepfather goes into the room, looks at the picture and says, "That's my grandfather." And then started naming everybody in the picture. And so it's wonder. I mean, that's what's one of the things that's so fun is that everybody in this community has a piece of the story, even if they don't know they have a piece of the story. So I love how y'all have contributed today. This is great.
I did go to school. My other classmate was Deanna Delana. That's how they pronounce it, was Delana.
Delana.
Yeah.
And I try and I never get it out right. Sorry. Yeah. So maybe she can come talk to us.
And I'm still trying to track her down.
Yeah. Okay.
They were in California a long time ago.
Deanna taught at Bowie for a long time. She's retired and I'm trying to track her down.
Cool.
This has nothing to do with the History Center, except that tonight at 9 p.m. on PBS, there's going to be a documentary called Librarians, and Carolyn Foote, an Eames librarian, is one of the people that will be in the documentary. It's about libraries and what they've been facing the last few years. Right.
Yes. She retired from Westlake High School about 3 years ago and has been very, very active in the librarian movement. So any other questions on any of the material we've seen today? Okay, well, I hope you enjoy the 15. 15 of that. We'll get to the others.